Hello, I'm Allison Taylor Brown, Director of the Village Writing School, and we welcome you to our online Literary Agent Summit. Today, I'm speaking with Lynnette Novak of the Seymour Agency. Welcome, Lynnette.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So when we go to the Seymour Agency website, we see front and center the story of your founder. And that her story very definitely has a Christian perspective. And so that's very striking and kind of sets you apart in a way from most of the other agencies. So if I were the author of Christian fiction or of memoir or self-help that had a kind of a Christian slant, could I assume that the Seymour Agency might be a good fit for my book?
You could, but you do have to look and see who's representing what. Myself, I don't represent Christian fiction or anything spiritual at all. So I wouldn't be a good fit, but there definitely are agents in our agency that would.
Okay. And your website also has a whole page devoted to pre-published authors. And so I thought maybe pre-published was like your clients who you have not yet sold their book, but they're your clients. But then when I read about those people, some of them are, in fact, do already have books. So what exactly is pre-published?
So you're correct in that pre-published for us means that we've picked up these clients and haven't sold their book yet. That doesn't mean that they haven't self-published or that they haven't been published with a smaller press somewhere else without our assistance.
Okay. Well, now, do you, if an author has self-published already, would you be interested in handling that book then or no?
Some agents might, but for the most part, and for myself, no. It's a very, very hard sell once it's already been published. And that also includes if you've published book one, but you're giving me book two. I can't sell book two without book one. So I would prefer just a whole different series and go from there.
Okay. All right. So you are an associate agent. So how do you learn this business? I mean, how do you interact with the more experienced agents, especially since you were in where, North Dakota? No,
Minnesota.
Minnesota, yeah, someplace up there in the north. Okay, yeah. Minnesota, yeah. So how do you learn the business, and how do you get grounded in this?
Well, for me, I mean, everybody has their own journey, but for me, everything I've done up until now has led to this. So I first was a teacher, so that helped me. So now I know how to teach people, so I can teach writers how to improve. And then after that, I was a freelance editor for 17 years, so I definitely learned the editing part of the business. And now it's just about the selling part. And Nicole Resnick is my mentor, and she's really fascinating and wonderful, and she helps me step by step. So if ever I have questions, I run them by her, and we can do everything either on the phone or online nowadays, so you don't have to actually be in the office with them.
Okay, all right. So if you get a query in that you think sounds really good, you run that by her, and she says
no,
not
at this point. I've been doing this long enough that I can recognize what I think is good or not. So then I'll request the full and I'll read it. And if I think it's something I want to offer on, then I will send it to her just to get her opinion.
I see. Okay. All right. Good. Okay. Let's talk about some of the different genres that you handle. You've got quite an extensive list of different kinds of books that you're interested in, which is good. So what's your favorite? What's the thing that when it comes in you say, oh, good, one of those?
I guess the way I would probably brand myself would be dark. So whether it's a thriller or a mystery or a suspense, horror, Anything dark is what I really prefer, but that doesn't mean that I don't like light and witty or romantic or, and I love worlds. So I love fantasy and sci-fi for that reason. I love to read, and I love so many different genres and subgenres. That's why as I'm building my list, I'm open to so many different things.
Okay. Well, what advice would you give somebody who maybe has a book that is, as you say, darker? What do you like to see in that, and what is a big mistake in that?
So it depends on the age group. Obviously, you can go darker in adult fiction than you can in middle grade. You don't want to be dark, especially you don't want to be gory just to be gory. You don't want to be dark just to be dark. And for the same reason that you don't want to add swear words or violence in other manuscripts just for a thrill factor. It really has to fit with the book and with the story, with the characters. So when I say that I like dark, it means that I really like a dark villain, and I want this villain to either be caught or killed in the end, because for me that's a victory, because good versus evil, and evil loses. So
Okay. Well, so let's talk about mysteries. So there's all these different subcategories, right? Traditional, amateur sleuth, cozy. Are there more? Are there others? These subcategories?
Historical. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's historical as well.
Yeah. So say I have a book and it has a dead body, but the characters are kind of funny, and it's a little lighter, but there is a dead body. So where would that fall in all these different categories?
Well, it depends on how you have it set up. It could be amateur sleuth, or it could be cozy mystery as well. It really depends on where you can go with it for the next book. For example, like a cozy mystery, often you'll see it's in a bakery, or it's in a bookstore, or something like that. And that tends to be what people take from book to book to book. It's that area, that specific store or location. Whereas for an amateur sleuth might start off, and it might kind of seem like a cozy even, but if at the end this person is going to become a detective or a sleuth in some way in the next book, and that's where it kind of isn't a cozy so much, because they're becoming more of a professional in the field.
Okay. All right, and then what we call a traditional mystery is what? Is darker? You've got more the forensic side of it, or what?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be darker, but it definitely can be. There might be more focus on the forensics and the police and the detective work. It will feel more serious. It won't be so light and witty, because the focus is more on the crime and solving the crime, rather than having fun with the characters.
Okay. All right, that's good. That's good advice. All right. Anything else you'd like to say to people who are writing mysteries?
You really have to see what's out there. Cozies sell well, but they have to be unique, and that's where it gets tricky, because everybody's done the recipe books, everybody's done the crocheting and the knitting, and so you really want to find a new niche in that world.
Okay. Good advice. So you mentioned that you were a freelance editor, and I think I read somewhere that you were an editor for 17 years. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that when you're reading a submission, you're automatically seeing what could be better and whether or not these flaws are fatal. So do you think that changes your approach to a manuscript versus an agent who doesn't have that much editorial experience?
I mean, I can't speak to them because I don't know how they do it. But for myself, even when I'm reading published books, I can't help but be editing as I'm going along. So what I'm looking for when I'm reading a manuscript is not perfection, because I know that I can fix it. But I definitely am looking for how much is wrong with it. Is it going to be a total rewrite? Is this story really ready? Is the author really ready? Does the author seem to know the craft well enough? Those are all things that will affect how well they can revise with me later. And I mean, I guess one thing I would caution people is if you're looking for an editorial agent, that does not mean I'm your editor. It does not mean that I'm there to replace a freelance editor or a critique partner or anything like that. My job isn't to teach you how to write, although I do that as I'm going along, but that can't be my main focus. I'm still trying to sell your book. That's my number one goal. So I want to help it get there, and that usually means revisions. But it doesn't mean that I can take something that is really, really not ready and start from scratch. I might do that if I really, really, really believe in the book, but it's going to be a rare thing. Instead, I would prefer that someone get outside help. And it doesn't have to be hiring a freelance editor. I'm not saying you need to do that. If you want to, by all means, go ahead, but you don't need to do that. What you do need is other writers, not just friends and family, but other writers who can guide you and who know something that you might not know and will go through your manuscript, not just as a beta reader, but as an actual critique partner. So they're looking at each scene, each chapter, not just the whole book as a whole, because they want to help you improve as well.
Okay. Well, most of us who have been doing this for any length of time have editor horror stories where we hired an editor and they didn't share our vision for the book, and so we just ended up spending a lot of money and then didn't have what we needed. What advice can you give writers who are shopping for an editor?
So the best way to shop for an editor would be to talk to other writers, see who's had success with which editors. I would get a sample edit from the editor as well, just to see if you like the way they edit, because some people, I mean, we all edit differently. As much as I'm a cheerleader for you, I'm going to say how it is. I'm not going to fluff it up and try to make you feel better. I'm trying to teach you and help you improve. So that's where my focus is, but there are definitely others that will be a little bit sweeter in their approach, but that might mean you don't get the editorial feedback that you need to improve. So are you looking for an ego boost, or are you looking to improve your manuscript? Figure out where that is. Right. The other thing is you can go to the EFA, the Editorial Freelancers Association, and there's two ways you can approach. They have job listings, so you can post a job and say, hey guys, I'm looking for someone to edit this kind of manuscript. This is the word count. This is how much I'm willing to pay. And editors will actually bid on the work. Or you can look through the profiles and see which editors you feel will fit, and then you can approach them.
Okay. Do you ever, see a story that you love, but it's going to take a lot of editorial work, and actually recommend to the writer, you need to hire an editor, and here's an editor that I know that is, would be a fit for you? Do you ever actually recommend editors to the writers?
No, I don't do that. I feel like that kind of can cross a line. So I just, will recommend that if you want to get an editor, go ahead, or if you want a critique partner, that's fine. You just need other eyes on the manuscript. Okay. So we as writers, we look at these websites of you agents, and it's like standing outside the bakery window. It's so beautiful inside there, and you're saying we do all this and we do this for our writers, and then we look at your wish list, and you've got all these points of what you're looking for, and oh my gosh, it just describes my novel perfectly, so so you get all excited and you send it in, and you get that rejection back, and it says, well, I like this, but it's just not right for my list. So what does what's that code for? What are all the different ways it's not right for your list? What does that mean? Okay, so at the Seymour Agency, there are a couple things. First of all, if you query us, our policy is if you haven't heard back after 3 weeks, it's pass. So we don't send rejections for queries, but we do send either a rejection or I want to know more if it's something that we're interested in and we've requested either a partial or a full. And when we do reject a partial or a full, we tend to not be negative with our rejection. I mean, the rejection itself is negative enough. And because the industry is so subjective, we don't want to say, we didn't like such and such character, because somebody else might like that character. And we don't want to influence your writing just because there was something about it that didn't work for us when it could very well work for somebody else. So instead, we try to focus on what we did like, so that, it's a little bit of an ego boost considering you are getting rejected. You can see what is working, at least for us. And so we'll talk about the voice, or we'll talk about the world building, or we'll talk about the pacing or the dialogue, or the setting. And, there's something about this manuscript that we requested it to begin with. And usually it's because we've seen the first 5 pages and wanted more. So just the fact that we're requesting is, positive, because it means that we like something about either the premise or the voice or something in the first 5 pages that makes us want more. But we certainly don't want to crush anybody by giving them negative feedback. And it's unfortunate, because I know as a writer, you want to know how you can improve. And so sometimes we will get authors who will say, oh, well, thank you for your positive feedback, but what can I do to improve? And we don't answer those because we don't have time to go through all that. And like I said, I mean, we really don't want to influence your journey. If other agents will do that, they will give you the feedback that you need, and then you can compare. But because it's so subjective, I would feel more comfortable suggesting that you get that feedback from your peers. And if you get a lot of the same feedback, then there's something that you need to change.
That's interesting. That you don't want to influence our writing. That's interesting. Let's see. I had another question. Oh, yeah. So, what determines whether you ask for a partial or a full?
So, some of it for me, and this is just my way of doing it and staying organized and staying on deadlines. So, if I'm at a pitch appointment, so someone's pitching to me directly, I most of the time will request a partial because I haven't seen the writing yet. So what that's telling the author is, I really like this premise, I really want to know more, but I don't know if I like your writing yet, so let's start with a partial. If it's something that is like very new and very unique and very different, and I don't want to wait, I probably will at that point request a full, but that's not very often. Where I request a full is when someone queries me and I've seen the writing. And so I know the premise and I've seen the writing, I know the style, I know the voice. And at that point, I don't feel like I need to just read the partial, I'll request the full right away. And then there's also Twitter pitch parties where I generally will request the partial. And then if I like it enough after reading the partial, then I'll request the full as well.
I see.
So I'm trying to balance my time too, because our agency, our guideline is that we try to get back to authors for partials and fulls within 9 weeks. So if I request a partial, I have 9 weeks to read that, and then I can request the full. Now I have another 9 weeks. So now I have 18 weeks. So if I'm starting to get a big pile, then sometimes I'll do that just to help spread out the timeline a little bit so that I do have more time to get to it, because there's nothing worse than having an agent reject because they didn't have time to read it, and I don't want that to happen. So I try to see where am I at with all of my projects and with everything I have in my query box and my partial and full box, and then I just go from there to judge how much I should request.
I see. Well, that's interesting. So what about, I don't have any idea if you do this, but I know that sometimes when agents request a full, they will say, I'm asking for an exclusive until I have a chance to read it, but maybe it's going to be like 3 or 4 months, how should we react to that when they say, I wanted the full manuscript and I'm asking for an exclusive until I get a chance to read it? What should we do about that?
Well, at the Seymour Agency, we do not ask for exclusives because that's not for your benefit. I would say that if that happens to you, First of all, sometimes you can't give an exclusive because maybe you have it out with other people already.
Right.
Then what, right?
Right.
So, but it's really not beneficial for you to have it sitting on one person's desk for an unlimited amount of time. If you absolutely are dying to give this to this agent, then I would recommend you decide on the timeline, and I wouldn't give them more than a month.
Okay.
After that, I would say, okay, I'll give it to you exclusively for a month, but after that, I'm going to start querying it again. So you're not taking it away from them. They still have the chance to read it, but at the same time, it's not going to affect you as much because you'll still be able to start querying again.
Okay. And then sometimes they say, let me know if somebody, if you get an offer from somebody else, let me know. So then we've got this offer. We're supposed to tell that person, okay, hold on, wait. It's this is stuff that you don't hear in conferences. I mean, how are you supposed to juggle these things when you want an agent so desperately, and now once, say it, but this one over here, you really like them too. What do you do? So you contact this one over here?
Yeah, first of all, even though everyone has a dream agent, I always recommend that you stay open because often you'll find that dream agent isn't as much of a dream agent once you talk to them compared to somebody else. And I'm not saying that you were wrong in thinking that was your dream agent. It's just, it's hard to know what the perfect fit is until you've given the chance to everybody to talk to you and let you know what their vision is for the book. There might be someone you connect to better. And so as much as, dream agent might be maybe because they are selling a lot of books or they're making a lot of money for everybody else, sometimes that's not the only reason why you should choose an agent. And I would always make sure that you choose an agent because it's the right fit, not because you're desperate enough to want an agent and you'll just take anybody, because the wrong agent is worse than no agent at all. So it's kind of like dating. If you marry a guy because he's the only guy that wanted to date you, well, you might have a crappy marriage, whereas opposed to if you waited a little longer, maybe you'll meet the right guy. So that's one thing I would recommend. And as for notifying other agents that you have an offer, we know this is how it works. So that's not a concern at all. Typically, an offer is made over the phone. Sometimes it's done via email, but it's nice if you can get on the phone with them so that you can really get to know more of them and feel if there is that connection or if there are red flags, because there can be red flags for us just as much as there can be red flags for you. So it's good to have that conversation first. And then, so they offer to represent you. And some agents will say, okay, I'm going to give you this amount of time. I'd be a little wary of that, especially if they're only going to give you a few days. There are a couple of agents out there that will give you 1 day to decide, which to me is a major red flag because that doesn't give you the chance to shop around. And that's why they're doing it. But it's not fair to you. Typically, a week to 2 weeks, especially around busier times for 2 weeks, like Christmas, Thanksgiving, when there's holidays in there, then you want to allow for 2, maybe even 3 weeks around Christmas. And so sometimes an agent will say a week and you'll be okay with that, and that's fine. Or they'll say a week and you'll say, how about a week and a half? How about 2 weeks? And they should be okay with that, because they know that you need to give everybody time to read. And there's 2 ways that you can do this. So once you've given her or him okay, I'm going to sit on this and I'm going to shop around a little, then you can either just contact people who have your full or your partial, or you can even go back and contact people who have your query. When someone queries me, I might not get, I have to get to it within 3 weeks because otherwise they're going to think I rejected them. But if, let's say, within a few days of querying me, you get an offer, well, that's still sitting in my box. So at some point I'm going to get to it and I might want to request it as well. So I personally appreciate it if someone lets me know, hey, I know you haven't probably read my query yet, but I do have an offer on it, because then I'll look at that query and I'll decide if I want to read it and request and then possibly offer on it too. Other agents will be like, if it's just my query box, don't bother me. So it's really up to you. if you feel like the agent you queried might be a good fit, then by all means contact them and say, hey, I have an offer. If you're like, nah, then you could just let that one go, or you can withdraw your query.
Okay. So you're not offended if you call me and offer me representation, and I say I need a week or I need a week and a half. That's not a turnoff for you. That's just how it
No.
works. Okay. All right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
okay.
we all want that right fit, So if you accepted right away, then I'm a little nervous for you because you haven't had a chance to see what else is out there. And not that I would say no if you accept it right away, because hey, that's great. Now we can move on. But on the other hand, I definitely don't want you to feel like you have to say yes right away. You definitely can shop around.
Okay. So in this call, what would be some of the questions that I should be asking you?
Okay. So first of all, you want to know what the agent feels like works and what doesn't work, because you want to make sure that you're on the same page as far as revisions go. That's, for me, that would be a deal breaker if someone doesn't share the same editorial visions as me, because I'm trying to fit it into either a certain market or a certain publisher that I'm thinking of. And if the author's not willing to work in the way that I'm wanting to work, then it wouldn't be a good fit. That doesn't mean they wouldn't get published elsewhere or find another agent. It just means it wouldn't be a good fit for me. So, and the same thing goes for the author. You don't want someone to say, oh my God, you have to take this character out and you have to take that character out and you have to do all these major changes if you don't agree with that. That's okay if you do, because sometimes, major revisions do make a big difference, but you have to agree with it. It has to feel right to you. And sometimes that means you need to sleep on this and you need to think about whether or not, those are revisions that resonate with you. And that's another reason why it's good to have that extra time and not make a decision right on the spot. What else could you ask? A lot of times people want to understand the submission process, because for each agent it's different, and especially the communication style. You want to make sure that that's a good fit for you, because some agents don't want you to contact them very often. Some are very open. Some will let you know. Like, for example, for myself, I'm a really open communicator, and I'm there for you no matter what. If you have questions, if you want to brainstorm your manuscript, the one you're working on with me, or the next book, I'm open to that. If and again, it depends on how the writer wants to communicate, because I don't want to be like hounding them either. If they I'll just check in when I want to talk to you, then that's fine too. So some writers want to know as soon as I put them out on sub. They want to know as soon as they get requests. They want to know as soon as they get rejections. They want to know exactly what the rejection said. Others don't want to know what the rejection said, not word for word anyway, just kind of like fluff it up a little bit, please, because I don't want to hear that they hate it, or some will just say, just tell me they reject it. And some will say, just give me a report at the end of the month so I know where we're standing. It's a very different approach for everybody. Are you still there? Oh, I can't.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I must have done. Okay. Yeah, okay. So it's a different approach for everybody, and everybody's journey is different. So it just depends what's right for you. And I think it's important going in that you know that, because if you just rush into a relationship with somebody not really thinking about what it is that you want, there's a risk that it might not work out. Whereas if you know, okay, this is the kind of communication style I want, this is how often I want to hear from the agent. If they're not going to be available for me, or if they're going to ship me off to their assistant or something like that, that's not really why I approached this agent. I wanted to work with her, so you need to understand what the relationship is going to be like.
Okay. Oh, that's all very good advice. So I once heard an agent say at a conference, if I'm going to sell your book, I will sell it in 6 weeks. But then I've also heard, of people it took 7 years for their novel to sell, and their agents hung in there with them. So what are your thoughts on that?
So every agency is different. With us, we are looking for a connection with a writer for the lifetime of their career. We are not just going to try to shop one book, and if it doesn't sell, then bye-bye. Like we'll just keep shopping whatever we feel is marketable and, try to be successful at some point. Sometimes that first book won't sell yet, but maybe after you've built up your name a little bit, we can take that same book and sell it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if it doesn't sell now that it won't sell later. But I also wouldn't promise anything. I wouldn't say, I'm going to sell your book in 6 weeks, because the industry is so unpredictable that there's no way of knowing how fast the editors are going to get back to us. And very often it's not within 6 weeks. So it's often more like 3 months or 6 months,
Wow.
sometimes longer. Yeah, so it's a long waiting game. Some editors won't respond. And when I say respond, I don't mean they won't request. Like, they'll have the book, but they might not read it until there's an offer on the table. So, you have to realize that
until there's an offer from an offer from some other publisher, you mean?
Right.
Ah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Not everybody does that, but there definitely are editors who will do that. And some, I'm kind of going off here, but some smaller publishers might read faster. Some newer editors at the bigger houses might read faster. It just depends on how busy they are. That's why we can't predict that. Like, I could never say, yep, 6 weeks I'll have this sold, because I don't know how busy they are.
Okay. Do you, when you read these manuscripts, do you have in your mind an editor that you think might like it? Is that what you're looking for in your mind, a connection between the manuscript and an editor that you know who might like it, or not necessarily? You're just looking at the book itself.
Yeah, I don't go in there looking for, hey, so-and-so is looking for this kind of book, because by the time I find it, she might have already found it herself. So, but sometimes it'll happen that you will have someone in mind as you're reading, hey, I know someone who would love this, but I don't look at it that way. I'm looking for something that I love and that I want to work with, that I believe in, that I'm passionate about, because if I'm passionate about it, there's a better chance that I could sell it than if I'm just meh. Like, I don't want to pick up something that I'm just meh, because if I'm just meh about it, then why is anyone else going to want it? So,
okay. Well, we've got some pitches for you to respond to. So we would like to know your response, of course, and then also if you have any advice to this person on improving their pitch. Okay, so the first one is entitled Stalking Stephen King. Meet Gordon Flagg. He holds a grudge against Stephen King. Twice they've met face to face. Twice Gordon was humiliated. Gordon's obsession turns deadly as King's fame continues to grow. Fans will recognize characters from King's publications, including a glimpse of Pennywise, who serves as King's guardian angel.
So the first thing that struck me with this is the fact that they're using a very public figure, Stephen King. James Patterson actually co-wrote The Murder of Stephen King, and it was about a deranged fan who reenacted the murders from King's books, and eventually King himself was killed. But weeks before the release of the book, Patterson actually pulled it back and decided not to release it out of respect for Stephen King. So that's one thing I want to point out. If James Patterson decided against having a book about Stephen King, I don't know if I would go there. But the other thing I wanted to point out is the potential lawsuit. In 2014, Scarlett O'Hara sued, not Scarlett O'Hara, yeah, right. Scarlett Johansson sued an author because he stole her image, is what she said. And all he did was he had a character in the book see, I think it was like someone walking into a coffee shop, and he thought to himself, oh, she looks like Scarlett Johansson. And that little mention of her was enough for her to sue him. So I would really caution people about using public figures without their permission. because it can be messy.
Wow.
So I would suggest for this author is like, why does it have to be Stephen King? Why does it have to be a real person? Why can't it be a best-selling author that you've made up, totally fictional, so that you're not going to get in trouble with lawsuits?
Okay.
I'm sure you could do a lot of the same things, but it would just be someone that we don't recognize. But that's okay. But that's what your world building is about. Help us understand who this person is, what they write, and make us feel for that person without knowing them. So that would be my biggest thing with this particular pitch is right away I'm like, oh, Stephen King, like that's a little bit scary for me.
Okay. Back on the James Patterson Stephen King thing, did Stephen King comment at all in any of that?
I'm not sure. I know that there's been an ongoing feud between the two of them.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the next one is YA fantasy. While vying for her brother's throne, a blue-haired princess discovers her brother is possessed by a god, one willing to tear apart the human world for a personal mission. Along with a commoner and a foreign queen, the princess fights to save both her brother and her kingdom from the god's plans.
Okay, so like I mentioned before, YA fantasy is really hard to sell right now. And a short pitch like this, it's really hard to showcase your story and make it feel unique, but you have to. And sometimes what that means is a short pitch isn't the right thing for your book. Sometimes it's better to do a query because then you can expand on it and really show how yours is different. So in that, you want to show your voice as much as possible. You want to use the same tone, style as the book. Just looking at this particular pitch, it doesn't stand out to me. There's nothing unique about it. It sounds like any other YA fantasy that's out there. So I wouldn't request this based on that. But that doesn't mean that the book doesn't merit a request. It just means the pitch isn't doing it for me. Another way to make it stand out more is to use comps. And you can do that like by saying, it's like this title meets this title. So then we get a little bit of a feel for what to expect in the story without you having to use all your words, because you can't in a shorter pitch. Or another thing you can do is, it's still using comparisons, but in a different way. So you would say, it has Jane Doe's wit from such and such a title, mixed with the world building of this title. So then again, you're showing us a little bit more with less words.
Okay. Good. Okay, and the third one is entitled Maze of Indigo. An orphan who is kidnapped and forced to work in the African Tanzanite mines, a powerful aid organization that ruins lives instead of saving them, and an idealistic young woman who must find the courage to rescue the child and expose the truth even if her own life is at risk.
So this is a different format. If you notice, they're kind of listing, this, and then at the end it shows the stakes. And that's totally fine. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm just pointing out that it is a different style from the other two. And I also like that this person showed us what's at stake, that the person's life is at stake. We know what the goal is, basically to try to save the child and expose the truth. So that's important as well. I find this very interesting, and I would actually like to know more. And I'm requesting this. So I would like to see the first 3 chapters of this. And what I would want is for the author to paste the query in the email and then attach the 3 chapters as a Microsoft Doc or DocX, either one. And then they can send it to Lynnette, make sure you spell it with 2 N's, at the agency.com. And then in the subject line, you write requested with your title.
Okay.
So I also just wanted to add a few things about pitches in general. A pitch especially a short pitch like this, is to tease. A lot of people try to tell too much of the story, whether it's in a query blurb or in a short pitch. And it's just about teasing us, giving us enough information to know what's different about your book, but without giving us too much information. We definitely want, if you can, it's again hard to do in a short pitch, but to show your voice in there. And this is with query pitches or the query blurbs as the same as pitches. You don't want to mislead the reader. So if your book is dark, I want to see some of that dark in the pitch and in the query blurb. If the query blurb is too fun and blah, 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 and then I go and read the book and it's dark, like that's not what I signed up for, So make sure that the top matches the book. You don't necessarily have to put word counts for short pitches like this, but definitely you do want to have that in a query blurb. And if you're doing like a Twitter pitch, which is often the same length or a little shorter than what you have here, then you might want to put the age group. So it might be hashtag MG for middle grade, for example, or hashtag A for adult, or hashtag YA for YA. And then sometimes you can even put the category like hashtag T for thriller, and there's a whole list of hashtags, just so that as an agent, when I'm going through these Twitter pitches, I can do a quick search for thrillers, for example, and then find all the thrillers. If you forget to put that, I might not see it if you just have it under adult, for example. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to have that extra little hashtag in there. But what we're looking for in a pitch, whether it's a short pitch or a longer one in the query, is we want to know who the story is about. And yes, you're going to have many characters, but try to focus on one, because even if your story has several point of view characters, the story really is about one person. If you're doing a short pitch, I would concentrate on that. If you're doing a query blurb, the exception is you can have like a romance. So you can have the heroine's point of view and then the hero's point of view, and then the third paragraph would be them together. But going back to this, so I want to know who it's about. I want to know what the goal is. What are they trying to achieve by the end of the story? What's at stake if they don't achieve this? And what's the conflict? What's keeping them from achieving this? And it's important for us to see that, because we'll be able to tell the conflict isn't big enough for a book. Sometimes the conflict can be solved in a conversation. And in that case, it's not a true conflict. So it's not going to really be a strong enough book.
Okay. All right. Wow, that was great. Thanks. Thank you. Anything else that you would like to say to our audience about anything agency?
So when you're querying agents, it's important to check guidelines, because we all have different guidelines and we all want different things, which can be really annoying for you, but it's our style and that's what we want, So for us, when you're querying us, we want the query and the first 5 pages to be pasted. We don't want you to send attachments unless they're requested. And that's usually the way the industry works. There are exceptions, but usually if it's not requested, don't attach. You want to concentrate on your book, not on your bio. Your bio can be very, very short, because quite frankly, it doesn't matter to me what you've done in your life. I want to know if I like the book and if I can sell the book. And that's what editors are going to be looking for too, with the exception of nonfiction. But I don't do nonfiction, so I'm not going to go there because I don't know enough about it. You also want to look at another point of the guidelines are, like for us, after 3 weeks, if you haven't heard back from us, then it's a rejection, which means that at that point, you can then query someone else in our agency. Some agencies are a no from one is a no from everybody. Mm-hmm. So make sure you understand what that is, because you could be missing out on opportunities if you don't realize you can still query other people, just not at the same time. You have to, wait the 3 weeks and then go back. I would also recommend looking on Query Tracker, because you can sometimes see how agents interact with people that way, but be cautious, because there will be possibly some negative reviews of agents from people that were rejected and didn't like that. So, just grain of salt, but it is a good resource anyway. What else? Talking to your friends and seeing who they recommend, going to conferences and possibly meeting with agents, and don't ever pitch to them in the bathroom, but it's okay to say hi when you're walking by or introduce yourself if you're having a drink next to them or something like that. But just remember that we're getting hit hardcore pitches all day long sometimes. So sometimes we just want to relax, and it's okay to chat with us. And if it comes up naturally, or we might even ask you, hey, what's your book about? That's fine, but don't just like come in, sit beside me and say, hey, I have a book and da 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 da, because I might not be open to hearing that at the moment, and you might be putting, your foot in your mouth, and it might leave a bad impression with me or another agent. So you always want to have a good game face on and do the right things. I would also caution people with social media to be careful what they say on social media, because we do check social media. So before we offer, we will do a Google search. We will do, we'll check Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and see how you're interacting with other people. If you seem to be a very negative person, or you're nasty, it might not be someone you might not be someone I want to work with. So obviously we're looking for positive, professional people. And that doesn't mean that you can't, mention that you've gotten rejections necessarily. But for me, it's about the behavior. So if someone says, oh, I'm querying and I got rejected, that's one thing. But if someone says, I got rejected and agents all suck and people don't know, that's a big deal. Like, or if you're querying me and you say, yeah, so I'm querying you because nobody seems to know how to write a book, so I wrote one that everyone will love. It's like, you're putting down the whole industry. I don't think that's someone I want to work with.
Yeah.
So just always keep that in mind, that everything you say and do in this industry will be noticed and will be possibly remembered. And it's a small industry. So if you treat an agent badly, there's a good chance that other agents are going to know about it. There's a good chance that editors are going to know about it. And you might have just blacklisted yourself.
Okay. All right. Well, this is all just great information. I think we've just, this whole interview has been amazing. You have just really given us so much good information. Thank you so much, Lynnette.
Oh, yeah, it was great.
Great interview. All right. Well, I guess if there's nothing else, we will just say goodbye for now, because I'm so excited to write this author and tell her to send you her 3 chapters.
Great.
All right. All right. Thank you, dear. Bye-bye.
Bye.